If you are the victim of long-term abuse, it can be very difficult to reconcile with what happened in the past and to heal it from a spiritual perspective. This is why I love working with the three colors of Tantra: black, white, and red. For this specific purpose, I want to take this conversation from the lens of Black Tantra. And this topic was inspired by a comment that I received from one of our viewers. So I'm going to read it to you guys, and then we're going to dive into the topic of healing from grief and pain whenever you have experienced some sort of long-term abuse in your life. Dear Silvana, so impressed with your journey. I watch you tell your story on Mark Vicente's channel, and you're inspiring. Thank you, my dear. I'm going to dive into your teachings. I am a survivor of a lot of abuse, and I am at an okay place now mentally and spiritually. I really struggle with regret and grief though. I am 35 years old, and a long abusive relationship in my 20s has cost me my health and youth and beauty. I look like I'm 50 and feel like 104. I can't shake the regret I have and the grief for so many lost years. When I look in the mirror, all I see is the wounds of the past. Can you help me get over this? And do you have any advice? Thank you so much. Okay. So this is very common, and it's usually common in people that are also spiritually inclined, because in traditional spirituality, there is this narrative that if something happened to you, you have to forget it, let go, and move into oneness and accept it. And that's healing. Healing is just like forgiveness and loving things away. And I strongly disagree with this at the human level. These are transcendental truths that don't really serve the human experience and the process. And also, they completely bypass the very obvious suffering that people experience in the planet whenever we are at the hands of abusers. This conversation is a conversation about power, which is why I like to take it from the perspective of like the Black Tantric lens, which deals with our relationship to power, to death, to pain, to all of the grotesque and heavy things to witness in life. So the first thing is to understand that your grief is absolutely valid, and this is part of the process. I think where we get stuck in grief for many years is because we try to interrupt the process by conceptualizing it or trying to transcend it or thinking that it's too long. But grief is a natural loss of something. There was a death that you went through because the part of you that was in that relationship, she had to die in order for you to get out of that abusive relationship. Whether it was because you walked away or because you were influenced by something externally, it doesn't matter. The death process is very real, and it's something that is gonna bring grief. Also, there is a bit of a connection here with the concept of time, right? Because you talk about lot years, and I'm gonna break down like all of the points here. But before that, I want to set the context of what Black Tantra is for me, because this isn't something that it's in the books. This is just a very Western organizational system of understanding the tantric concepts. And when I talk about tantric concepts, I'm talking about weaving our consciousness with whatever life has given to us in that specific moment. From the perspective of Black Tantra, this is an invitation to reclaim power. That's what's happening. You were wounded, and the wound is not, it's like the actual act, the abuser is not in your life anymore. This is somebody that you left behind, that it's in the past, yet the pain of it is still with you. So there needs to be a reclamation of power, of your own power. And we're gonna talk both about the part of healing of this and then the reclamation of power, because they're gonna feel like opposite, and I might contradict myself in this conversation, and this is on purpose because we're addressing two things. First, we're gonna address the pain and the wound that needs presence, that needs to be felt, that needs grief, and that needs professional guidance. In your message, you said that you are in an okay place mentally and spiritually. I'm guessing you've probably done healing work and therapy and work with actual professionals that help with these situations, like mental health professionals, not shamans or witches or people who are spiritually helping, but people who have that grounded and all of the safety measures that our mind needs to process these types of events. So I am assuming in everything that I'm going to discuss today that this is something that has already happened, because you say you're in an okay place mentally and spiritually. You just want to know how you can get over it, okay? So whenever we contemplate darkness as a teacher, it's very different to embody darkness and to be repressed by darkness. Because when we are repressed by darkness, we are in a battle of power. There is a part of us that has believed that releasing power of agency is what love is. And this is not a personal thing. This is a collective wound, especially with women. Women have this thing where a lot of women that grew up either in cultures, environments, or families that were abusive or that were very wounded in some way, whether because of systems or because of a specific story in the family, there's a tendency of believing that releasing the power is equal as loving or allowing yourself to love, and that unconditional acceptance is something that you need to bring into a relationship, or a conditional love is something that needs to be present in a relationship. And this is not true. You cannot unconditionally love another human being. That's unconditional love should only happen between a mother and a baby, because that's like survival. That's the hierarchy of life. Whenever we're looking at a couple in polarity, a man and a woman, or a person that's embodying masculine and feminine energy in interaction with one another, there's nothing unconditional about that. Because the only unconditional love that we must have is with all parts of ourselves, and that doesn't mean indulging our ego or our lesser instincts. It means accepting what's there and then deciding how do we relate and how do we approach this part. So this is understanding why I enter into this toxic dynamic without the blame or the guilt that comes with this. It's already like releasing a burden of your back. Because you're not necessarily putting all of the weight on yourself. You're understanding, yes, you were a participant of this dynamic. A part of you chose to give its power away. Yet, why wouldn't you, if that's what we have been conditioned to do? Now, you're out of this space, and now the question becomes, well, what do you do with what's left? In Tantra, we understand life as the dance between Shiva and Shakti. Shiva being awareness, Shakti being everything that is observed by Shiva. And in Shakta Tantra, you can look at Shakti from the 10 faces of Shakti, and these are the 10 Mahavidyas, right? And the most popular one in, that we know are Kali or Lalita Tripura Sundari. They're just 2 faces out of these 10. But there's one Mahavidya that is called Dhumavati. Dhumavati is a widow. She's old. She's ugly. She has lost everything. She's in a cart that doesn't have wheels. She cannot move. She ate Shiva, so she ate consciousness. She is what remains after everything has been lost, including hope. She is like the end of the void itself. And she's the symbol of poverty, pain, suffering, the most visceral forms of suffering and human abandonment that we can experience is what's represented by Dhumavati. Of course, a lot of people that grew up in these traditions are afraid of this particular aspect of Shakti, because who wants that? But this is one of the greatest teachers for this moment in which you're in, which is the identity of the survivor of the trauma had to also die for you to get out of the abusive situation, and the new identity isn't formed yet. So you're in between, in the bridge, and that feels desolate. And you get pulled by the past, wanting to fight back that reality, fighting with time itself, with the aspect of Shakti, which is Kali, fighting with what happened in your mind, because the present feels like a void. The thing about the void is that the void is the darkness and the space in which new life can emerge. And in this particular transition, life is inviting you to finalize releasing the little threads of hope that was worth it. Because a part of you is like, well, why did that happen? What happens to me now? And that negotiation we're doing with the past, as like, why did I lose so much time? Why did I lose my youth? That needs closing up. That process needs to fully die off. You need to arrive at a place where that full emptiness takes over, because these are transitional periods. Doesn't mean that forever you're going to be in this state, but when we enter into this full acceptance of the void, of losing something and accepting it, and then we lose the hope of meaning for something, there is a very beautiful rebirth that happens within ourselves. And then in this rebirth, it's like new life begins. And the beginning of new life is a beginning of a new aspect of yourself, to get to know yourself. So this is phase 1 of this process, is closing up this process by addressing the remaining rage, the remaining anger, the remaining hatred that you rightfully feel because of what you lost, because of what was taken from you, the power dynamics and the abuse that you experienced. Accept that fully and then release it. And the only way to release emotions like that is not through blocking its expression, but is to embracing them and realizing how absolutely divine anger, hatred, and rage are for this specific process. You feel it, you witness it, you let it move through your body. And of course, you always bring yourself back into balance, right? Because the body cannot take so much of that. These are very fiery emotions, so they get purged through the body, and then you bring yourself back through breath. If you need support for this process, I suggest you get a somatic therapist, a mental health professional to help you with this phase. What happens on the second phase, right? The second phase, this is where it gets fun and interesting, because once you start realizing and getting to know this new version of yourself, then you get to form the new identity that is going to support this next phase of your life. And this new identity is going to use all of that as fuel. And she's gonna go back into that space to bring back that power. Because all of that pain, all of that darkness, that is Pluto energy. And Pluto, yes, it's darkness and it's the underworld, but it's also power. We learn about this in the myths, right? We have the myth of Persephone. She had to go into the underworld in order to become the queen of the underworld. We have the myth of Inanna. She also descended. 7 layers of power were removed from her as she descended to the underworld. She was dead for 3 days, and then she was resurrected back into life. These myths tell us of what needs to happen psychologically within ourselves whenever we go through these types of powerful transformations that come from abuse, that come from being completely disempowered. Because even if you were able to pick up the phone and get help, you physically couldn't do it, because psychologically you were completely encapsulated in this narrative, right? So in this second part of the process, hold on, I wrote some questions. It's very normal to feel like you have lost time and grief and all of that. And it's important to identify the difference between lost time and identifying with it, or grieving the loss of who you were. Because even if who you were was an identity of being abused, it's still an identity. And going through that means going through a death and a rebirth. So what does the healing process look like? First is to go through the full Black Tantric process, which is to unite your conscious and your awareness with all of the black items, which are grief, anger, rage, hatred, like I mentioned in that phase 1. Then I recommend the cleansing season. The cleansing season is just removal, right? It's getting even more naked spiritually. What you don't want any more of. This is not a time to add on all of these healing techniques, but of removing things. Maybe removing yourself from a space, from a situation, from a job, from a group of friends, from relationships, from family members. It's just cleansing, removing, because all of those things are pulling down on that old identity, and you cannot move into the next version if you have not let go of the things that are keeping you or reinforcing that older identity. Then there comes the ritual magic practices that I recommend, which will seal your aura. When we are abused, we're talking about the realm of the eighth house in astrology, and the eighth house is a house where we combine trauma, abuse psychology, depth psychology, sexuality, power games, tax, death, things that are really hidden and dark. And that getting all of these situations psychologically, it creates these holes in your energetic field. And if there was an abuse or abused relationship, right, there's like a cord in you energetically. So it's important after cleansing to seal your aura, and you do this through also separation, to understanding your boundaries. What are you available for right now, and what are you no longer available for? Getting clarity on that before life brings you something else to engage with. This is something that gets done on your own. Then I really encourage you to get into some sort of protection magic. This doesn't have to be like ritualistic if you don't like it, but learning about spiritual protection, about discernment. How does yes feel in my body, and how does no feel in my body? That is the most sacred tool. After abuse, you lose your compass, you lose your center. The body, you disassociate from it because it's so intense to be in your body, because there's so much suffering that you kind of check out. And people who've experienced many years of abuse, they even their memories, it's like everything's foggy. It's almost as if you were not there, because you were not there. You were checked out, disassociated. So you need to return to the body and learn how to protect yourself. I love protection magic and rituals, and a lot of people are terrified and scared whenever I use the word black magic, because they're imagining like, killing an animal and blood and all of this, and this is part of it. However, when we are afraid of that, we're like this. We're like, I'm afraid of it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to learn about it. But there's people in the world that are not afraid of it. And usually they're using this for very hideous acts. We see it with what's going on with the elite of the world, all the crazy shit that they do. And they're doing all of this understanding these principles. I suggest, really recommend, if you're into spirituality and occultism and things, Dion Fortune she wrote a book called Psychic Self-Defense. And she looks at all of this like dark magic from the perspective of how do I learn about it so that I can protect myself from it. Because there is the physical element, which is removing yourself from the actual abuser, getting the legal protections if your country has legal protections for women, making sure that you're removing yourself, moving to another city, securing your body, making sure you're safe. That's the first level. Then we have the emotional level, helping yourself psychologically, getting a support group around you. And then there's the spiritual layer, which is how do you protect yourself spiritually? How do you reclaim your authority of your own body so that next time that you're in the presence of an abuser, you can clock it immediately. You can say, something doesn't feel right, and I've been there, done that. I'm not gonna go down this path. This is a no for me. You do that by understanding your newly found boundaries as like a baby, like you're a new person. What are my new boundaries now that what has worked in the past, and enforcing them. That's where most people mess up, is that they have a list of their boundaries but they don't enforce them. They're like, well, let me excuse this, actually, this person said this, and it's like, no, boundaries are non-negotiable. They are non-negotiable. If they are negotiable, then they're not boundaries. They're little power tricks that you're playing with your own shadow. If you create your set of boundaries, what are you not available for? That's a non-negotiable. And if at some point in your life it changes, it's because, not because something outside of you asks you to change it, it's because after many years or months or whatever time, you have realized like, okay, I want to move this. I'm ready for more. I'm ready for less. I want to cut this off. I want to add this onto my life. You identify that with time and always checking in with the body. The body becomes the compass for this entire process. By reconnecting to the body, right, and bringing it back to safety, then you can start re-exploring again your own sensuality and eroticism. A woman's vitality is in her sexual centers. The part in your message that says, I look like I'm 50 and feel like I'm 104, that tells me you are disconnected from your own libido, from your own sexual energy. And I don't mean just lust, because lust, you can be completely disconnected and be lustful. I mean from your vitality, the natural Shakti force through your body, what in Jungian psychology, Jung calls libido. What in Tantra we call Shakti herself. That pulse of life, whenever we reconnect with it, youth returns. You don't age, you rejuvenate yourself. That's the infamous glow up that happens after you do leave an abusive relationship. For some people it's differently, but it's like it retains youthfulness. Time passes and maybe you do get the wrinkles, maybe of course time will pass, but you don't feel old and you don't look dragged down. You feel radiant, you are glowing because you are self-contained in your own beauty, in your own magnetism. Okay, so learning how to reconnect with that means first establishing safety in the body, understanding what lights you up and what doesn't, understanding what yes feels like in your body and what no feels like in your body. This is crucial. It's a very distinct feeling, and you have to identify how your body communicates to you a yes and a no. And using adornment, finding what is the new expression that you want to have. I've had so many phases in my life of like different expression. What lights me up the most right now, what makes me feel the most myself, is this way of dressing and expressing myself. I wear a lot of black and red, and that comes from my essence. It lights me up. It turns me on, which is counterintuitive. You might think that I'm gonna be dressed in flowers and pink, but actually I was dressing in very bright colors when I was internally feeling very void. I like the simplicity of the black because I become the center of expression. Not necessarily my clothes, but my essence. So finding out how you want to express yourself, what makes you feel lit up and excited for you. Being very careful with the external gaze and the society gaze. It's not what people tell you you look good in, it's what you feel good in, what looks good in the mirror for you. And understanding what are your new turn-ons and turn-offs. What foods do you like to eat? How can you eat and really feel alive and feel sensual and explore what the flavors and the complexity of your senses is bringing you? This type of spirituality is the feminine path. The masculine path is about the void, like just annihilating any sort of connection with the physical body and the senses, releasing it, surrender, ascension, up, removal. That's the masculine path. The feminine path is about engaging with the senses, bringing your own God self, your goddess self, into your physical human experience through all of your senses, through what you see, through what you smell, through what you feel, what you eat. Having an erotic experience with yourself is going to bring back that youthfulness that you feel like you're lost. And lastly, everything you went through, all of that pain and suffering, that is raw power available for you to reclaim it. And you can reclaim it as a master because you took yourself through the underworld of abuse and brought yourself back out. Once you do this, once you reconnect with your body and then feel the essence of being alive again, the amount of confidence you will gain in your own ability to transform yourself over and over again, it's something that is going to be felt by everything around you, everyone around you, because you're just oozing with confidence of no matter what, I know how to die and be reborn again. And life is gonna demand that you die and be born again constantly. Life is a preparation for death. And we do that through our own identities. And we do that by really embracing them, like really loving the hell out of them. And then when the time comes to release them, we release them with love and with grief and with pain and with rage and with anger. And then we return to that void and we come back to that balance. And then we're born again and again and again and again and again until your body is no longer meant to be here. And then you can have that final transformation, moving from matter into a spirit, fully releasing the material reality. So what you've experienced was a very difficult initiation, but an initiation. an initiation into power, into the mastery of what the absence of power teaches us, so that you can understand how to manage your own power and reclaim it. I hope this helps, and if you listen to these words and can embrace some of these practices and feel a change, allow yourself to create and share. And if you listen to this answer and this message and you're interested into diving deeper into the connection and the relationship between your own spiritual center and death, life, sexuality, money, and power itself, then I invite you to check out my mentorship, The Access Point. This program is not for people who are in the middle of a healing process. You must already have gone through that. It is for the reclamation of that center, to create your own spiritual system, your own foundation, so that you can interact with all of these powerful forces without losing the part of you that is eternal throughout the process. In this mentorship, you will learn how to let go, how to die, how to be reborn, how to transform, and how to interact with these powers, both externally and internally. Additionally, if and then this is actually for you. Oh, Unscripted Ria, I think that's your IG name. I have a series that is called it's Pink Tantra, the Tantric Taste. And this is a Tantra of self-healing and reconnecting with your own sexual energy, only on your own. Like, you don't need a partner for this. So I'm also gonna be leaving that there below. You can just sign up on my newsletter, and then you can get the videos delivered, so you can go. It's like a 9-day process, but it will give you everything that I discussed here. It has a little part of everything. But overall, this is the big process. I'm not sure where you're at specifically in your process, but it might be helpful just to reconnect with that vitality. If you already have done therapeutic work and inner healing work, and now you're just feeling that emptiness, then the Tantric Taste series will really help you reconnect with that vitality and embrace your self-love and connect with your inner goddess again. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time.